Although this was not the way the Denver Broncos had hoped the season would end, this was still a massively successful season for a young squad. And now the Broncos are turning the page to the 2025 offseason, where hopefully they'll be able to address some of the remaining personnel issues on this team and be able to propel themselves even further in 2025, hopefully deeper into the playoffs and potentially a conference championship run or maybe even a Super Bowl run. The Broncos have a lot of work to do, and that work now starts today with them having officially been eliminated from the playoffs after the Buffalo Bills took them down in the wild card round 31-7. Before we talk about this Broncos team and what we can expect from them in the offseason, I just want to go ahead and say how proud I am of this squad. Remember the expectations for this team heading into the year, especially from the national media. They were not expected to win more than 5 games. They doubled that win total projection. They had as many All-Pros on their roster as they did projected wins. They made the playoffs for the first time since 2015. This was a successful year, Broncos country, and now it is time to turn the page to the offseason. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the free agents for the Denver Broncos for 2025. This is courtesy of Adam Schefter. These are the key free agents that the Denver Broncos need to think about. Do we want to bring any of these guys back or turn the page and potentially get younger and cheaper at these respective positions? We'll start off with Javonte Williams, who most likely is not going to be back for the Denver Broncos. He has been reserved to the third down, pass-catching, pass-protecting role. Sean Payton tried to get him going in this game, and he just was not able to rise to the occasion. It is time to move on from Javonte Williams. Cody Barton and Justin Sternad are both set to be free agents, and I also believe it is time to move on from both of those guys. They have been at least somewhat serviceable at times this year, but it is clear that neither one of them are starting caliber linebackers in the NFL, especially Sternad. He's a good special teams guy, and he's a good backup reserve linebacker, but I just do not believe that Justin Sternad is going to be a starter in the NFL long-term at linebacker. And then Cody Barton, he's had his moments as a starter, and none of them have been particularly impressive. I believe it is now time to move on and get younger and get cheaper at the linebacker position. There aren't really a whole lot of free agents at that position. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video that I would be interested in bringing in. So I believe that the Broncos are probably going to look towards the draft to address that particular position. Little Jordan Humphrey. I'm kind of iffy on if the Broncos will bring him back. He's an okay blocker, but he blew a crucial block on a screen pass earlier on in this game today, and that was a crucial drive for Denver where they could have converted and they could have potentially gotten back ahead in the game, but that was just a bad play from Little Jordan Humphrey. I know fans will criticize Sean Payton for calling a screen in that situation. It was a good play call, and it would have worked out perfectly had Little Jordan Humphrey held up on his block. DJ Jones, he's listed here, and I do believe that DJ Jones has a very strong chance to come back. I do believe DJ Jones has played really well for this Denver Broncos team in his tenure here, especially this year, and I think that he's a dominating force up front, and it's going to be tough for the Denver Broncos to replace him, so DJ Jones probably going to come back. Riley Dixon had a really strong day today. I think he's going to come back, no questions about that. Matt Parrott, he's been a swing tackle for the Broncos. He'll probably be back. I don't know if the Broncos want to add some younger, cheaper depth on the offensive line. If that's the case, then they might elect to move on from Matt Parrott. We'll see what happens there. Michael Burton, he'll be back. He's a special teams ace. They utilize him on offense at fullback. Pretty much no question that Michael Burton's going to be back. Tremon Smith, same thing. Special teams ace, he's coming back. Zach Cunningham, He hasn't been utilized much for the Broncos, so I don't think he's going to come back. Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson, I do hope both of those guys are back. There's a good camaraderie and a good chemistry in the Broncos quarterback room, and I don't want to lose that. I want to keep that intact for at least one more year. Hopefully Davis Webb doesn't leave either, and we can keep everybody in that room together. So I'm looking towards re-signing Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson if I'm the Broncos. Wilson can be your long-term developmental quarterback, probably could be your long-term backup, and then Stidham, he's a good veteran sounding board. He's the elder statesman in the room, and Bo Nix and him have a really good friendship off the field. Same with Zach Wilson. They all hang out together every single week at Bo Nix's house, and they just develop that chemistry off the field, which is awesome. So I want to keep the quarterback room intact, and I want to keep both Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. And then Quinn Bailey, he has been out for the entire season as he's been recovering from a broken leg. He was the Broncos' jumbo tackle last year. Matt Parrott replaced him in that role this year. I don't know if Denver's going to re-sign Bailey. He's been with the Broncos since 2019, survived several different regimes, several different offensive line coaches, but I don't know where his health stands. First of all, it was a very gruesome leg injury that he suffered in training camp, but also I just think the Broncos may want to move on to greener pastures at that position. Sucks for Quinn Bailey. I don't know if he's going to be back or not. We'll see what happens there. As far as cap space for the Denver Broncos to add free agents, it's looking like they're going to have about $58 million in available cap space. That number can fluctuate. Remember, the cap is expected to go up once again, so the Broncos could have a few more $1 million to play with. They could also make a couple of cuts in order to get some more money. Alex Singleton, at this point, I believe the Denver Broncos are going to look to completely revamp their linebacker room, so I think they might look to move on from Alex Singleton. They would save about $5.5 million and only have to eat $1 million in dead money, so that one feels like a no-brainer to me. Additionally, Adam Troutman, you can save about $2.5 million and only have to eat $2 million in dead money, so I would move to cut Adam Troutman as well, but besides that, there aren't a whole lot of guys that I would look to subtract from this roster in terms of cutting them, because I think the Broncos have a really strong, young foundation going here. It's just going to be all about building off of that in this offseason. Let's talk about some of the biggest positions of need for the Denver Broncos as we head into free agency in particular, because when you look at free agency, there are going to be some areas where it's really, really strong, but there's also some areas, especially some areas of need for the Broncos, where it's really weak, and Denver might want to prioritize adding players in the draft. I also think at certain positions where they need a lot of depth, such as tight end, maybe linebacker, possibly wide receiver, I could see them adding maybe some players both in free agency as well as the draft. Let's take a look at wide receiver first of all, and the first name that sticks out is going to be T. Higgins. He is looking for number one wide receiver money, and it's going to be all dependent on if Denver wants to fork out that much money. I should also mention, they have $58 million in cap space, but they have rich owners who have liquid cash available. That means that the Denver Broncos can dish out high signing bonuses whenever they sign these free agents, and they can spread those bonuses across the cap for future years and circumvent the cap. You have to have liquid cash on hand to put into an escrow account in order to do that. Some teams have the liquid cash, some teams do not. The Denver Broncos are the richest owners, have the richest owners in the NFL, so they obviously have that cash on hand. So if they want to make a splash move and bring in maybe a guy like T. Higgins and pay him a substantial amount of money, they could afford to do that relatively easily. Other names that highlight this list, Stephon Diggs, I'm not really interested in. Keenan Allen, no. Amari Cooper, no. Chris Godwin would be intriguing, but it would be all about what the contract circumstances are, because he is coming off of a season-ending injury. He broke his leg. I do not think that the Broncos are going to sign him to a substantial contract. I don't think any team is, but Any contract that Chris Godwin were to get is probably going to be heavily incentive based with a lot of protections for the team. So that would be one I'd be interested in, but with very, very heavy stipulations on the contract. Deontay Johnson, maybe a cheap veteran addition. That could possibly be intriguing. Hollywood Brown, he's too injury prone. No thank you. Nuke Hopkins, I'm good. He's getting up there in age. I want to get younger and cheaper. Elijah Moore is one that I'm a little bit intrigued by. I would be interested in signing Elijah Moore. He played really well for the Cleveland Browns, and he torched the Broncos alongside Jerry Jeudy in that matchup here in Denver. So definitely would keep an eye on Elijah Moore. Outside of that, I'm not seeing a whole lot more on this list for free agent wide receivers. Like I said, the Broncos might look to add an addition in free agency at wide receiver as well as the draft. I could very easily see that happening. Let's go ahead and move to the tight end position now. And highlighting free agent tight ends, we have Tyler Conklin of the New York Jets, and this one could be intriguing here. Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints, reconnecting that Broncos-Saints pipeline. Sean Payton drafted Juwan Johnson. Pete Carmichael was heavy in Juwan Johnson's development. I would not be surprised at all if the Broncos pursued Juwan Johnson, but this is another position where I think multiple additions are going to be made. Adam Troutman's probably not going to be back. I don't think Lucas Kroll is going to be back. This is a room where probably Nate Atkins is going to be the only one that I would like to bring back. So sign a guy in free agency and then draft a tight end as well. I don't think that the Broncos signing Juwan Johnson would stop them from drafting Tyler Warren if he were to fall to you, or Colston Loveland if he were to fall to you. That might be tough for the Broncos, but I don't think that signing a Juwan Johnson in free agency would stop them from making that move. Outside of Juwan Johnson, there's not really a whole lot there. Maybe Mike Gesicki, I guess, but not a whole lot there at all in free agency at the tight end position. I do think that the Broncos will look towards the draft, but Juwan Johnson is the one guy in free agency that you can at least connect that pipeline to Denver because of all those connections from New Orleans. Let's go ahead and also look at the off-ball linebacker position, because that's been a big position of scrutiny for the Denver Broncos. That's a position where I think additions are definitely going to be made. You look at Levante David. I don't think he's going to leave Tampa if he even returns to play at all. He's going to be 35 next year, so that's definitely one that I would be intrigued by a little bit, but I don't think Levante is going to play for any team other than Tampa Bay, and it would only be for a one-year deal if you were able to get him anyway. Bobby Wagner, no. Devondre Campbell, obviously not. He's an off-the-field nightmare. You've got Tyrell Dodson, who's played well in stints with the Miami Dolphins this year, former Buffalo Bill. He played in that Baltimore Ravens scheme in Seattle and kind of struggled in it. So, I don't know. I would be interested in Dodson potentially, but outside of that, again, there's just not a whole lot there at the linebacker position. We talked about how it's just hard to find high-quality linebacker play in the NFL. With college offenses playing these spread schemes, linebackers aren't really developing coming out of college. You get these nuggets like Fred Warner or the occasional good player at off-ball linebacker, but it's really tough to find a true difference maker at that position in the NFL. They're going to have to dig deep in the draft and hope they find some good scouts who can dig up some good linebackers in the draft, because there's just not a lot there in free agency at the linebacker position. Let's look at safety, because P.J. Locke is a guy who has had some issues with tackling. He played particularly poorly in this Buffalo Bills game. If Denver is going to look to maybe upgrade at safety, you look at Justin Reed. I don't think Justin Simmons is going to come back here. That ship has sailed. Maybe Tyrann Mathieu. I don't know about that one. He was in New Orleans, but he doesn't have any ties to Sean Payton. He signed with New Orleans in the first year of Dennis Allen, so there's not really a pipeline between Tyrann Mathieu and Denver, even though he's a former New Orleans Saint. Marcus Epps, he's coming off of a torn ACL. Jeremy Chin, that could be intriguing. He's played really well for the Commanders this year. No doubt Washington's going to look to re-sign him, but Jeremy Chin might be intriguing, the nephew of Steve Atwater. Julian Blackmon, yeah, that could be intriguing. There are some additions here at the safety position in free agency that they could look to make if they wanted to possibly upgrade over a guy like PJ Locke. So let's also look at the running back position. That's going to be another one where I think free agency is going to potentially come into play. Let's go ahead and take a look. Oh, stupid. Go back. There we go. Najee Harris is the guy who highlights this list, and I really like Harris. He has played so well for the Steelers this year. He runs hard. He runs physical. He hasn't missed a game in his career due to injury, knock on wood. I really think Najee Harris could be an intriguing option here if the Broncos were to go down the free agency pipeline at the running back position. I do think they draft a guy as well, but that's the guy who really highlights the free agency list. A.J. Dillon, it seems that his career might be in jeopardy because of a neck injury. Nick Chubb, he's just been too injured throughout his career. I don't think Javonte Williams is going to be back here in Denver. You could bring Samaje Perine back and put him back in his old role. That would be funny. Aside from that, it's looking like maybe Najee Harris or draft for the Broncos at the running back position. So that's kind of the free agency preview for the Denver Broncos. As far as what their draft pick is going to be, they have a chance at either getting the 19th or the 20th overall pick. It shouldn't be any lower than 20. So overall, one of the higher picks that you can get in terms of making the playoffs, which is good. The Broncos will find out officially after this Buccaneers-Washington game what their draft pick will be. Will it be 19 or 20? We will update you with that information later on this afternoon or this evening after this Buccaneers game. Alright guys, be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. And let me know in the comment section below, guys, who would be the one splash move in free agency that you would be interested in making? T. Higgins definitely highlights that list for me, and we'll make a separate video a little bit later on talking about potential trade targets that the Denver Broncos could be after. Alright guys, and until next time, I'm your host Gage Madrid, saying peace out.